If I tell you what happened that Christmas morning, you might think I'm weak. Or worse, you might see me as the fool I really was back then. But I need to say it out loud, maybe for the first time. I remember standing by the kitchen counter, clutching the cheap mug he gave me, pretending I hadn't seen the receipt that said 2 for 1. I watched him tear the shiny paper off the gifts I saved for months to buy a new watch, a leather wallet, the cologne he always sprayed before late meetings. He smiled at me, that crooked smile that once made my stomach flutter, and I almost believed we were normal. Almost, because while our son was giggling with his toy truck under the twinkling lights, I saw the way my husband's eyes flicked to his phone. He thought I didn't notice him typing under the table, didn't feel the cold shift in the air. I did. Deep down, I knew that every Merry Christmas was dripping with lies, but I held on to hope like a fool grips a blade, letting it cut deeper every time he whispered, "I love you, baby." When he stood up, gifts half opened, our son yelling, "Daddy, stay." I knew. He didn't even try to lie. He just said, "I'll be back in an hour. Don't wait up." And I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, frozen, with wrapping papers scattered at my feet, wondering if she'd also bought him a watch, if her perfume was stronger than mine. This is the story of how he opened my gifts, and then left me to rot in our broken home while he ran to hers. But it doesn't end there, I promise you that much. So before you judge me, tell me, where are you watching this from? It means more than you know. Stick around. You need to see what I did next. I still remember the way the front door slammed that morning. It rattled the old picture frames of our wedding day, the ones I hadn't dared to take down yet. I stood there, hugging myself, staring at the dent in the wall he'd made last winter when he threw my mother's casserole dish during another one of our fights. I always painted over the cracks. I always pretended we were whole. Our son Eli sat on the worn-out carpet, playing with his new truck, the one Santa brought him. His curls bounced as he made engine noises, blissfully unaware that his daddy wasn't coming back, not today, maybe not ever in the way he deserved. I wanted to sink to the floor beside him, to scoop him up and promise him this was just a bad dream, but instead, I went to the bathroom, locked the door, and let myself see the truth in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was pale, her eyes puffy from nights of silent crying, pretending to be asleep when he stumbled in at 2 a.m., reeking of cheap perfume that wasn't mine. I leaned closer, tracing the faint bruise near my collarbone, the one he said was an accident when he grabbed me too hard during an argument. I told myself I'd leave so many times, but every time, he'd bring me flowers or that stupid mug, or whisper, "Baby, it won't happen again." It always happened again. I splashed water on my face, bracing for the lie I'd have to tell Eli about where Daddy went. I had no strength left to spin fairy tales. Instead, I made him peanut butter sandwiches and turned on the old TV to drown out the silence. But the silence kept screaming at me, telling me he was with her, laughing in some cheap motel room, maybe giving her the same cologne I bought him. By afternoon, our neighbor, Mrs. Cole, knocked on the door. She held out a plate of dry sugar, cookies, eyes darting behind me like she might catch him sneaking in half naked. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart. Everything all right?" Her voice dripped with pity. I hated it. "Yeah, we're fine," I lied, my mouth dry. "He just went to see his mom." I don't know why I lied. Maybe because saying he was with another woman made me feel like I'd failed, like I was less than her, whoever she was. After she left, I sat by the window, watching the snow pile up on the hood of his truck. He'd taken the old Honda, the one with the squeaky brakes. I wondered if he'd take her for coffee after. If he'd come home smelling like her shampoo. I wondered if he'd kiss Eli goodnight with her lipstick still on his collar. Hours passed. Eli fell asleep on the couch, clutching his truck like it was the only thing that wouldn't leave him. I should have called my sister, should have packed a bag, but I didn't. Instead, I poured myself cheap wine, the same one he always mocked me for buying. "Tastes like vinegar, baby. Can't you get the good stuff for once?" And I sat in the dark, sipping the bitterness down. Somewhere between the second and third glass, a thought curled around my brain like smoke. What if I went to see her? I laughed at first. I'm not that woman. I don't make scenes. I stay quiet. I hold the pieces together. But the thought kept growing, pulsing, until I could taste it in my mouth, sweet and sour. I imagined her face when she opened the door. Did she even know about me? Did she think she was the only one? I set my empty glass down, my heart pounding like a war drum. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was years of lies pressing against my ribs. But I grabbed my coat, kissed Eli's forehead, and whispered a promise I didn't know if I could keep. Mommy's coming back, baby. Mommy's not gonna let him break us anymore. I stepped out into the icy night, the cold slicing through me like truth. I didn't know her address, but I knew where he took her. He thought he was so clever, always paying in cash, always parking behind the rundown Bluebird Motel by the highway. And so I went. I went to see her, and I swear, I didn't know back then how far I'd go to find out the truth. The wind bit into my cheeks as I trudged across the frozen parking lot of the Bluebird Motel. The neon sign flickered above me, buzzing like a dying fly. I stood there for a moment, staring at the row of dirty windows, each one hiding someone else's secrets. A man stumbled out of room 4, zipping up his jacket, avoiding my eyes like he could smell the desperation clinging to me. My breath formed ghost clouds in the air. I kept replaying the last thing I'd said to Eli. I pictured him waking up, alone, his small feet padding across the cold floor, calling out for me in that sweet, sleepy voice, "Mommy." Maybe I was a monster, maybe I'd lost my mind, but something inside me had snapped when that door slammed. I stepped closer to the row of cars. There it was, the old Honda. I could see the edge of his duffel bag in the back seat, the same one he used for business trips. I wondered if she'd given it to him, if she knew he packed it with lies. Room 7. I didn't know how I knew, but I did. A crack of warm yellow light leaked from the curtains. Shadows danced inside, 2 shapes moving as one. My legs went numb, but I forced them to keep moving. I stopped at the door, pressed my ear to the thin wood. A laugh. A woman's laugh. Soft, like wind chimes, his voice lower, that same fake tender tone he used on me when he wanted something. I should have turned back, should have run home to Eli, but I knocked, once, twice. My heart thundered in my ears. For a moment, silence, then footsteps. The knob turned, and there she was, the woman I'd given my life away for, without ever knowing her name. She was younger than me, prettier, 2 long red hair, perfect skin that glowed even in the cheap hallway lights. She wore my husband's flannel shirt, the one I'd bought him last Christmas, the one that still smelled like our laundry soap. She tilted her head, confused, lips curling into a half smile. "Can I help you?" Her voice dripped honey. She had no idea. Then he appeared behind her, shirtless, hair sticking up like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. "What the hell are you doing here?" he hissed, grabbing her arm, trying to pull her back inside. For a second, my throat closed up. I wanted to spit venom, to scream every filthy thing he'd done to me. But all that came out was, "Did you know?" The girl blinked. "Know what?" She looked at him, then back at me. "Who are you?" He shoved me back, not hard enough to knock me down, but enough to feel that old ache in my shoulder. "Go home, Sarah. This isn't your place." I tasted blood. I must have bitten my lip. "Isn't my place." I laughed. A jagged, broken sound. "You opened my gifts this morning. You kissed our son goodbye. And now you're here with her. Does she even know you're married?" The girl recoiled like I'd slapped her. She pulled away from him, arms folded over her chest. "You're married?" Her voice cracked. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Don't listen to her, babe. She's lying. She does this. She does this." I barked out a bitter laugh. "Tell her about the bruises, the lies, the late nights. Tell her about Eli waiting at the window for you to come home." I could feel the hallway shrinking around me, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. She pushed past him, stepping closer to me. Her eyes searched mine, wide and scared. "Is it true? You have a kid?" He grabbed her wrist again. "Get inside, Amber. She's crazy. She'll say anything to ruin us." That word. It made something inside me snap clean in two. I reached into my coat pocket, fingers brushing the cold metal I'd slipped in before I left my mother's old Swiss Army knife, the one I kept in the junk drawer for emergencies. I didn't plan to use it, I swear I didn't, but I felt its weight, its promise. And I wondered what he'd do if I did. I looked at her, Amber, her lip trembling, tears pooling in her mascara. Maybe she was a fool, too. Maybe she didn't deserve this anymore than I did. He stepped forward, crowding my space. His breath was sour with cheap whiskey. "Go home now or you'll what?" I snapped. My hand clenched around the knife. "Hit me. In front of her. Show her exactly what you really are." The hallway spun. I could hear my pulse roaring in my head. I knew I had two choices: turn around and walk away, or step inside that room and drag the truth into the light, no matter how ugly it was. So, I did the unthinkable. I pushed past him, past her stunned face, and crossed the threshold into that cheap motel room. The smell of stale sex and cheap perfume wrapped around me like poison. He lunged after me, but this time, I didn't back down. Inside that dingy motel room, time felt like it split in two: the before me, who'd swallow the lies with a trembling smile, and the now me, standing under the flickering ceiling light, eyes darting across the unmade bed that still held the imprint of their betrayal. The TV murmured low in the corner, some Christmas special about families loving each other. I almost laughed at the cruelty of it. He slammed the door shut behind us, the sound echoing off the stained wallpaper. Amber hovered near the bathroom door, arms wrapped tight around her chest, like she could fold herself small enough to disappear. Her eyes bounced between him and me, the ugly truth spreading across her perfect face in blotchy red patches. "Sarah, you need to leave," he spat through clenched teeth. "This is between us. You've got no right dragging her into it." I turned to him slowly, my hands shaking but my voice steady, deadly steady. "No right. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to see the girl you bought flowers for with our grocery money? You think I wanted to imagine you touching her with the same hands that bruise me when you're drunk?" I heard Amber suck in a sharp breath. She looked like she was about to say something, maybe an apology, maybe a lie, but she said nothing, just clutched the cheap flannel tighter around her shoulders. He stepped closer, that predator's smirk crawling back onto his face. "Stop making a scene. Go home, Sarah. I'll come by tomorrow. We'll talk this out like adults." "Like adults," I repeated, almost choking on the words. I dug my nails into my palms so hard I felt skin break. "You don't get to talk it out anymore. Not when you keep dragging that dirt back into my house. Our son's house." His hand shot out so fast I barely flinched, fingers digging into my upper arm, pinning me against the dresser. The lamp rattled, threatening to topple. Amber yelped behind him but didn't move. Typical. They never do. They watch. "You're gonna shut your mouth," he hissed, eyes wild, spittle hitting my cheek. "You're gonna shut your mouth and go home and pretend like none of this ever happened. Or I swear to God, Sarah, you'll be sorry." Somewhere deep in my ribs, that last shred of fear, the one that always made me back down, died right then. My hand slipped into my coat pocket. I felt the small knife's shape against my palm. My mother's voice echoed in my head. "Keep it close, baby girl. One day you might need it." He followed my eyes down, saw what I was holding. His grip loosened just enough for me to twist free. I didn't lunge. I didn't slash. I just held it up between us like a cross to a vampire. "Touch me again," I breathed, "and I'll make sure they never find what's left of you." He laughed, that cruel bark I knew too well. You can't even leave the house without crying. You're gonna kill me, Sarah," in front of her. I looked over his shoulder at Amber. She was trembling, mascara streaks running down her cheeks. Something shifted in her then, maybe seeing the knife, maybe seeing my eyes, because she finally spoke. "Let her go," she whispered, her voice cracked like thin ice. "Please, Jason, let her go. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know about any of this." Jason. His name sounded like poison on her tongue. He spun around, barking at her. "Shut. Bafta don't know what she's like. She's lying. She's always lying." But I could see the fear flicker in his eyes. He'd never seen me stand my ground, never seen me hold a blade steady instead of my tears. The power shifted, not all the way, but enough to taste. I took a step back, the knife still raised. My voice came out calm, but inside I was shaking like a tree in a storm. "You can keep your lies, keep your cheap motel, but you're not stepping foot in my house again. Not tonight. Not ever. Unless it's to pack your things." He scoffed, but he didn't move. I could almost feel him calculating, wondering if it was worth lunging at me, wondering if Amber would call the cops if he did. Then Amber did the one thing I didn't expect. She grabbed her purse off the floor and threw it at his chest. "I'm not doing this. I'm not being the other woman. I'm not being part of your lies. I'm done." His face twisted, veins bulging in his neck. "Amber, don't you walk out that door. You don't know what she's like." But she was already grabbing her coat, tears mixing with the fresh snow, blowing in when she flung the door open. She looked back at me, just once, and her lips moved like she wanted to say, "I'm sorry," but no sound came out. Then, she was gone, swallowed up by the night. I stood there, staring at the empty doorway, my chest heaving, my hands still clutched around the knife. Jason turned to me, eyes dark, breath ragged. "You think this is over," he growled. "You think you can just come here, ruin everything, and walk away." I forced my voice to stay calm, though every cell in my body screamed to run. "Try me. Go home if you want. I won't be there when you do." But when he lunged again, I knew this wouldn't end here in this cheap motel room. One way or another, someone wasn't going to walk out the same. I don't remember dropping the knife. Maybe it slipped from my shaking hand when he lunged at me, or maybe I let it go on purpose. I'll never be sure. All I remember is the dull thud as it hit the stained carpet, the tiny metallic sound, swallowed by his fists pounding against the dresser just inches from my head. "Look what you did, Sarah," he roared, spit flying, his face so close I could see the burst blood vessels in his eyes. "She was perfect. She made me feel like a man again. And you," his hand slammed down on the dresser, rattling the cheap lamp so hard it fell and cracked. "You ruin everything you touch." I wanted to scream back, "You ruin everything." But my voice stuck in my throat, maybe because part of me still believed him. That broken part that thought if I'd just been prettier, quieter, better, he wouldn't have needed her. That same part that kept me stuck in that rotting house all these years. He grabbed my wrist so tight I thought I heard a pop. Pain shot up my arm, but I didn't cry. Not this time. He dragged me to the bed and threw me down like I weighed nothing. My head bounced off the thin mattress. The springs squeaked like rats, scurrying under a floorboard. "Since you're here, might as well get what you came for, huh?" he sneered, fumbling with his belt buckle. My stomach lurched. I kicked out, my foot catching him square in the shin. He cursed and slapped me so hard my ears rang. I tasted blood. "You always wanted to ruin me," he panted, pinning my arms above my head with one hand. "You want me to look like the bad guy? Fine. Let's see who the cops believe. The crazy wife with the knife, or the husband defending himself from her psychotic games. The knife. God, where was it?" I twisted, trying to free my arms, but he was stronger. He'd always been stronger. Outside, I could hear a truck passing by on the highway, its engine rumbling like salvation I knew would never come. Nobody stops for cries in a cheap motel. Nobody wants to get involved. Then I heard the faintest sound, a soft knock on the wall. At first, I thought I'd imagined it. Then another. Then a muffled voice, almost like a prayer. "Everything okay in there?" Jason froze, breath ragged. His eyes darted to the door, then back to me. In that second, I felt his grip loosen. I didn't think, I just moved. I jerked my knee up, hard, catching him between the legs. He let out a strangled howl and stumbled back, knocking his shoulder on the TV. I scrambled off the bed, my vision swimming with tears and panic. My fingers scraped across the carpet until they found the knife, cold and slick. I grabbed it, my whole body vibrating like a live wire. Another knock, louder this time. "Hey, you good in there?" It was the motel manager. I recognized his voice from when we'd checked in once for our date nights. Before I knew those rooms weren't only for me. Jason lunged again, but now I was ready. I held the blade out, my arm trembling but steady enough. "Don't you dare," I screamed, so loud my throat tore raw. "Don't you dare come near me again." The door rattled, the lock jiggling. "Ma'am, open the door. Should I call someone?" Jason looked at me, and for the first time I saw it. The fear, the realization that maybe he wasn't untouchable anymore. His eyes darted to the window, then the door. He hissed, You did this to us." Before I could answer, he bolted for the bathroom, slammed the door, and I heard the tiny window screech open. I staggered to the door, unlocked it with shaking fingers, and nearly collapsed into the arms of the manager, a wiry man with crooked teeth and a battered ball cap. He looked over my shoulder, eyes wide. "Sweetheart, you okay? What the hell's going on in there?" He peered past me, saw the overturned lamp, the bed askew, the blood smeared on my lip. "Jesus, you want me to call the sheriff?" I glanced at the bathroom. It was empty now, the window hanging open, cold wind whipping the shower curtain like a ghost. He was gone, just like always, slipping away when things got too real. I looked at the manager, my voice no more than a croak. "No, not yet. Just, please, I need to get home to my boy." He frowned. "You sure he gonna come back?" I didn't have an answer. I just clutched the knife tighter and stepped out into the freezing night, my breath fogging the dark. Somewhere out there, Jason was running, maybe to her, maybe to the next cheap motel, but I knew one thing: he wouldn't come slithering back into our house without consequences ever again. What I didn't know, what I couldn't know, was how far he'd go to make me pay for fighting back, and how much more I'd have to lose before I'd finally feel free. I don't remember the drive home, just flashes, the frost glinting off the road like broken glass, the radio playing some soft Christmas ballad I couldn't stand to hear. My hands stayed clenched so tight on the wheel I barely noticed the dried blood on my lip, the bruises blooming under my sleeve. Every mile felt like I was driving deeper into my own chest, digging for a courage I wasn't sure I had left. When I pulled up to our trailer, the porch light was still on. I'd left it that way for Eli. The sight of his tiny shape curled up on the sofa through the front window nearly brought me to my knees. He'd pulled his favorite blanket over his head, toy truck tucked under his arm like a promise that someone would always come home to him. I stood on the porch for a moment, the knife still in my pocket, the cold eating at my bones. I wondered what my mother would say if she could see me now. I could almost hear her voice. "You get one life, Sarah. Don't let no man break it to pieces for you." But she'd let my father do worse, and still stayed. So maybe the words never really meant anything at all. Inside, I moved slow, careful not to wake Eli. The living room smelled like stale popcorn and cheap pine, air freshener the only way I could pretend we had a real Christmas tree. I brushed my fingers over his curls, felt his warm breath puff against my palm. "Mummy's here," I whispered. The lie sat bitter on my tongue, because part of me knew I wasn't really here. Not all the way. Not yet. I tucked him in, kissed his forehead, and tiptoed to the bedroom. Our bed was still unmade from that morning, the cheap department store comforter tangled like a nest for ghosts. I sat on the edge, the weight of the day crashing down. In the darkness, every sound felt like him: the creak of the floorboards, the hiss of the wind rattling the window. I kept waiting for the door to burst open, for his boots to stomp across the linoleum, for his fists to find the soft spots he'd memorized so well. But the hours passed. He didn't come. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not even when the sun rose and the neighbors peeked through their dusty blinds, pretending they didn't see my swollen face as I took out the trash. By noon, the phone rang. I knew it was him before I picked up that heavy silence, his breath thick with that special brand of blame only he could spit through clenched teeth. "Where's my boy?" he snarled. "No, how are you?" No apology. Just the same old leash, tugging at the place he thought he still owned. I cleared my throat, forcing my voice not to shake. "He's here, safe. You stay away from him." He laughed, that cold, empty laugh. "You think you can keep me from my own son? You think your little show at the motel changes anything?" I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. "If you come here, I'll call the sheriff. I'll tell them everything. I have the bruises. The neighbors heard us screaming before." I didn't know if that was true. Nobody ever called the cops when it mattered. But I needed him to believe it. "Sure," he drawled. "Tell 'em, then we'll see who they believe, the sweet token housewife, with her glass of wine, or the father who provides for his family." The line went dead. I stared at the buzzing receiver until Eli's sleepy voice behind me made my heart twist. "Mommy, where's Daddy?" I turned, my lip trembling. I wanted to lie, say Daddy was working, that he'd be back soon. But lies had built this prison. I couldn't lock my boy inside it too. I crouched down, brushing his curls back. "Daddy's not coming home for a while, baby, but Mommy's here. Mommy's gonna keep you safe, okay?" He frowned, his little mouth turning down like his father's when he didn't get his way. "Did Daddy make you cry again?" The truth clawed at my throat. "Yeah, but not anymore." I hugged him so tight he squirmed, giggling like it was all some big game. Maybe, in his world, it still was. But mine had turned into a battlefield, and the worst part was I didn't even know what the next attack would look like. That night, I slept with the knife under my pillow. Every creak, every gust of wind scratching the trailer's tin siding made my heart slam against my ribs. I wished I could say I felt brave, but mostly, I felt like prey, one wrong move away from being hunted down by the man who once promised to love me until death did us part. But little did I know, death was closer than I ever dared imagine, and not all of us would make it through the storm he was about to unleash. The days after Christmas crawled by in a haze of fear and half-whispered plans I could barely piece together. Jason didn't come back right away, and that silence was worse than any slammed door or broken dish. It was like waiting for a snake you know is coiled under your porch steps. You can't see it, but you know it's there, waiting for you to slip. I started locking every door and window, something I'd never bothered with before. Our trailer was the kind of place where the neighbors all pretended they didn't hear your business, but they'd sure notice if your lights stayed off too long. Mrs. Cole came by once with a leftover pie, her eyes flicking to the bruises on my arm I'd failed to cover with makeup. She didn't ask, she never did, just patted my hand and said, "You know where we are if you need anything." But I didn't know where to start needing people. I'd built my whole life around making sure no one knew what he really was. Now that the rot was seeping out, I didn't know how to mop it up without drowning in it. Eli, sweet Eli, seemed to sense the shift. He clung to me more than usual, his little hands always grabbing my sweater hem like he was afraid I'd vanish. At night, I'd feel his tiny body crawl into my bed, pressing against my back like a warm, breathing shield against the cold echo of an empty side of the mattress. 3 days after he ran, the knock came. Not loud, but steady. The kind of knock that made the fine hairs on your arms stand up. I froze in the kitchen, the dish towel dropping from my hands. Eli looked up from his coloring book, eyes wide. "Mommy, stay here," I whispered, praying my voice didn't shake too much. Through the peephole, all I saw was that battered ball cap, the same one the Bluebird Motel manager wore. I cracked the door just enough to see his weathered face. "The permanent nicotine stains on his fingers, ma'am," he rasped, shoving his hands deep into his coat pockets. "Didn't mean to spook you, just thought you should know. Your man was at the Bluebird last night. Broke into the front office, smashed up the register, looking for the security tapes. Said they'd ruined his life." My stomach lurched. Did he say anything about me?" He shifted his weight, eyes darting to the dark trailer behind me. "Said you were gonna pay. I'm real sorry, ma'am. I called the sheriff. But you know how it is. Takes half a day to drive out that far. Figured you'd want to know." I thanked him, even slipped him the last 20 from my coat pocket. He tipped his hat and shuffled back to his rusted pickup. When the taillights vanished down our potholed street, I shut the door and pressed my forehead against it, fighting the urge to scream. I knew what this meant. He was desperate now. Cornered animals don't just slink away, they bite hard. That night, after Eli drifted off in my bed, I sat on the couch with every light in the trailer on. I clutched my mother's old knife, its blade clean but cold. I thought about calling the sheriff. But what would I say? My husband's crazy. Half the county already knew that, but knowing doesn't mean they care enough to come knocking when you're screaming into your pillow. Around midnight, I heard it. Tires crunching gravel just past the old oak tree out back. Headlights flickering through the threadbare curtains. I didn't breathe, didn't dare peek out. I just sank lower into the couch cushions, my fingers white-knuckled around the knife. A silhouette moved past the window, then another. Heavy boots scraping across the porch, the faint rattle of the doorknob, a low voice, like the devil whispering from the crawlspace under the trailer. "Sarah, baby girl, open up. I just want to talk." Every word felt like a nail hammered through my ribs. He knocked, gentle at first, then harder. Eli shifted in the bedroom, mumbling in his sleep. I thought about running in there, barricading the door. But what if he lit the place on fire? What if he dragged us both out by the hair? "Sarah," his tone turned dark, mean, the sweetness stripping away. "You gonna make me break this door down? You think that sheriff's gonna get here in time to stop me?" I pressed the knife to my thigh, the cold sting keeping me conscious. I pictured Eli's face, his wide brown eyes that still looked for Daddy in every shadow. I knew then this wouldn't end with a knock. One of us would leave this trailer tonight, but not both of us. Not alive. The banging stopped so suddenly, it made my ears ring. For a moment, there was just the sound of my own breathing, ragged, shallow, the taste of metal thick on my tongue. I forced myself to stand, creeping to the edge of the window. I could see the outline of him on the porch, just his shadow shifting side to side like a wolf scenting blood through the door. "Sarah," he drawled, voice muffled but clear enough to slice right through me. "Open the door. Don't make this worse." I glanced at the hallway where Eli's bedroom door cracked open. I could see the glow of his nightlight spilling across the carpet. I prayed he'd stay asleep, that he wouldn't pad out with those bare feet and wide eyes. Whispering for Daddy. Another slam rattled the door. The cheap latch trembled. I backed up, heart punching against my ribs so hard I thought it might break through. I fumbled with my phone on the counter. No bars. Of course. Out here, you're on your own. I sucked in a breath. No more waiting, Sarah, my mother's voice. No more painting over cracks that only get bigger. I slipped into Eli's room, heart cracking at the sight of him, his tiny body curled into a knot of innocence that had no place in this nightmare. I knelt down, brushing a curl off his forehead. Baby, you need to wake up now. Don't be scared. His eyes fluttered open, confused, half dreaming. Mommy, he croaked, his voice sticky with sleep. I scooped him up, all warm limbs and that soft baby shampoo smell. We're gonna play a game, okay? We're gonna hide. Another slam. This one sent a crack up the wood by the latch. Eli whimpered into my neck. I forced my legs to move, carrying him to the tiny crawl space in the hall closet, the one Jason always said we should board up because it let the cold in. I set Eli down, pulled blankets off the shelves, tucked them around him like armor. Listen to Mummy, baby, I whispered, pressing my finger to his lips when he tried to speak. You stay right here. No matter what you hear, you stay. You don't come out until I say, understand. His eyes welled up. But what about you? I kissed his forehead, hot tears spilling onto his curls. Mommy's gonna be okay. Mommy's gonna fix it. Okay. Another crash. The door buckled inward, wood splintering like kindling. Eli let out a soft sob. I shoved the blankets tighter, closed the crawlspace door, and slid the hamper back in front of it. Maybe it wouldn't hide him from the monster coming down the hall, but it was all I had. I gripped the knife so tight my palm burned. My feet felt rooted to the cracked linoleum as I stepped into the living room. There he was, standing in the doorway, the front door hanging by one hinge, snow swirling in behind him like ghosts come to watch. He looked wild, hair matted with sweat, eyes bloodshot, breath puffing white in the cold. He smiled, that slow, syrupy smile I'd once fallen in love with. You made me do this, Sarah, he said, his voice low. You pushed me away, you embarrassed me. Now look at you shaking like a stray dog. I stood my ground. My mother's knife gleamed under the kitchen light. Leave now, or I swear to God, he laughed. You gonna stab me, that what this is? You think you can hurt me? He stepped forward, 1 step, 2, I backed up until my hips hit the counter. You always were weak, he hissed, spitting the word like poison. Couldn't even keep me satisfied. Had to go sniffing around my business, ruining everything. You don't get to ruin me and walk away. Sarah, his hand shot out, grabbed my wrist so fast I barely saw it. Pain flared up my arm. The knife clattered to the floor, skittering under the table. He slammed me back against the counter, one hand on my throat. I choked, vision swimming with hot sparks of panic. Where's the boy? He growled, his fingers digging into my skin. Where's my son? I gasped, clawing at his arm. Gone, I croaked. You'll never touch him again. Rage twisted his face, veins popping in his neck. Liar. He tightened his grip. My legs buckled. My pulse roared in my ears. Then, a sound I didn't expect. The faintest squeak, Eli's tiny voice. Mummy. Jason's eyes snapped toward the hallway. I used the moment I grabbed the heavy glass sugar jar from the counter and smashed it into the side of his head. It didn't knock him out, but it staggered him enough. He spun, eyes wild, blood dripping down his temple. You're dead, bitch. He lunged and I dove for the knife under the table, my fingers scraping the linoleum, my body moving on pure terror and a promise I'd made to my baby boy. This time, I knew it was him or me. No one was coming to save us. Time slowed to a syrupy crawl as I scrambled on my hands and knees, fingers grasping for the cold steel under the table. I could hear him behind me, his boots scraping across the floor, his breath coming out in ragged, furious snarls. Sarah, he roared, voice cracking with that feral edge I'd only ever glimpsed in shadows before. You think you can take my son? You think you can take what's mine? I felt the blade slide into my palm, my mother's knife. So small but suddenly heavier than all the years I'd let him carve pieces out of me. I turned just as he grabbed my ankle, yanking me back so hard my knees scraped raw against the linoleum. Where is he? Jason spat, his eyes darting to the hallway. to the crawl space, to every secret I'd ever tried to bury. Where's my boy? My voice came out hoarse, broken, but steady enough to cut him right back. He's not yours anymore. I drove the knife upward, blind, desperate. The blade caught his forearm, slashing open skin. He howled, stumbling back, clutching his bleeding arm. His eyes, those eyes I used to think were so full of love, were nothing but black pits now, a void where a man used to be. You gonna stab me, Sarah? He panted, circling me like an animal. You think that'll stop me? I'll come back. I'll always come back. You can't hide from me. But even as he bared his teeth, I saw something I'd never seen in him before: fear. He knew he'd lost control the moment I put my hands on the truth, the moment I stopped flinching when he said he loved me. I braced myself against the table, leg, the knife slick with his blood and mine, my hands trembling, knees throbbing, visions swimming with every betrayal I'd ever swallowed. Look at you, I spat. All those years you made me believe I was nothing without you, that I couldn't breathe unless you let me. I barked out a laugh that tasted like salt and iron. You're the one who can't breathe now. Jason, you're the one who's nothing. He lunged again, wild and sloppy. I sidestepped, the blade catching his side, ripping through his flannel. He bellowed, spun, and backhanded me across the mouth so hard my ears rang. I stumbled into the hallway wall, and that's when I saw Eli. My boy, my sweet, tiny boy, peeking through the crack of the crawlspace door, his big brown eyes like two moons, round with terror. His small fingers gripped the edge of the blanket I'd wrapped him in, his bottom lip trembling. Mommy, he whimpered. That word, so small, so full of everything I'd been too scared to be. Jason's head snapped in his direction. He bared his teeth in a grin that made my stomach twist. There's my boy. Before he could take a step, I hurled myself at him. The knife flashed in the hallway light. One slice, two. I didn't know where I was hitting him. I just knew I had to keep him away from Eli. I felt his warm blood spatter across my cheek, smelled the copper tang that would cling to my skin for weeks after. He roared, his hands flailing, grabbing my shoulders, trying to crush me against the wall. We slammed into a family photo, the glass shattering, fragments embedding in my hair. The image of us, me, him, and baby Eli, slid down the wall and disappeared under our feet like a lie finally exposed. His strength faltered. I could feel it in the way his grip loosened, his knees buckling. He stared at me, pupils blown wide, chest heaving with ragged wet gasps. Sarah, he rasped, as if my name could stitch up the wounds he'd spent years ripping open. I pressed my forehead to his for a heartbeat, the last goodbye to the man I'd once loved, or maybe to the part of me that thought I needed him. Then I pushed him back. He crumpled, his breath rattling like dry leaves. I stood over him, the knife dripping onto the cheap carpet. My hands shook, my shoulders heaving. Behind me, Eli let out a tiny sob. I spun to him, dropping the blade as I fell to my knees. It's okay, baby, I whispered, my voice raw. Mommy's got you. Mommy's got you now. I pulled him out of the crawlspace, buried my face in his hair. He smelled like crayons and milk and safety, the one thing I'd fight for until my last breath. But somewhere behind us, Jason let out a wet, ragged cough. I turned, and the look in his eyes made my blood run cold. He was still trying to speak, trying to crawl toward us. One final threat, crawling out of his throat like a curse. I knew then this wasn't over. Not until someone made sure he'd never get up again. Not until I was ready to open my door to the world and tell it exactly what I'd done. I don't know how long I sat there on the hallway floor, clutching Eli so tight he squirmed and whimpered against my neck. I could feel his heartbeat, frantic, terrified, thumping through his tiny ribs, like he was the only thing tethering me to this world that suddenly felt so paper-thin. Jason's breath rattled behind us. I didn't want to look at him, but I did. His eyes were wide, wild, trying to focus, trying to muster up that final command he always held over me. Come here, help me, fix me. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I pulled Eli closer, rocking him gently. My hand drifted to the knife on the floor, that cheap, battered blade with my mother's initials scratched into the handle, the same one I'd kept for just in case, the one I'd imagined using 1,000 times but never really believed I could. Until tonight. Mommy, is Daddy okay? Eli's voice was so small it cut deeper than any blade. He peeked at Jason's shape crumpled against the wall. the spreading dark stain beneath him, soaking into the cheap carpet like a rotten secret, finally seeping out. I cupped Eli's face, forcing myself to smile through the iron taste in my mouth. We're okay now, baby. That's what matters. We're okay. I don't know if he believed me. I don't know if I did either. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the loose pane above the sink. Our trailer felt colder than ever, every crack and gap in the walls reminding me how easy it had been for him to find his way back in, how easy it would be for the world to come knocking with questions I couldn't lie my way out of this time. I scooped Eli into my arms and carried him to the couch. He curled into me, his eyelids drooping, exhaustion too heavy for even fear to keep him awake. I pulled the old quilt over us, my back to the front door, the door he'd splintered to pieces, a lock that wouldn't hold out the truth anymore. When Eli's breathing finally steadied, I eased him onto the cushions and stood. My legs felt like rusted hinges, ready to buckle under the weight of what I'd done. I walked back to Jason's body, or what was left of the threat that had ruled every heartbeat in this trailer for years. His eyes were glassy, his chest barely rising, a ragged rattle catching on every labored breath. He looked so small now, smaller than the monster I'd made him in my head all this time, smaller than my fear. I crouched down, not close enough for him to reach me if some final flicker of fight sparked in those eyes. I wanted to say something, to find some final word that would stitch all this blood and terror into something that made sense, but there was nothing left to say. He tried to speak, a gurgle, a curse maybe my name. I didn't wait to hear it. I stood up, stepped over him, and grabbed the cordless phone off the counter. My fingers dialed with a calm I didn't know I had left. When the dispatcher answered, I heard my own voice clear, flat, unrecognizable. My husband broke in. He tried to kill me. I had to defend myself. There's a child here. Please send someone. I hung up before she could ask more. I knew the neighbors would peek out their windows when the sirens came. I knew the sheriff would ask the same old questions. Why didn't you leave? Why didn't you run? As if anyone really wants to believe that sometimes you can't run, not far enough, not fast enough, not when the monster knows where you sleep. I sat by Eli again, stroking his hair. My heart thudded slow now, heavy but free in a way I'd never felt before. I thought about what people would say when they heard, how they'd whisper about me at the grocery store. How they'd say I snapped like it was something that just happened one night instead of something that was done to me over years and years of broken doors and broken bones and broken promises. I pressed my lips to Eli's forehead, his little hand curled around my finger like an anchor. He didn't need to know all of this yet. He just needed to know we were safe. Out there in the cold, I could already see the faint red and blue flashes, reflecting off the neighbor's siding. My freedom, wrapped in the wail of a siren and the judgment of strangers. Did I do the right thing? Was there another way? Maybe. But when I looked at my boy, warm, breathing, whole, I knew I'd choose this again 1,000 times over, because he opened his gifts that morning and then left to see her. But in the end, he had no idea what I'd do to make sure my son would never open a door to that monster again.